Hello and welcome to the South Lanarkshire Digital Climate Change Workshop, where we will be discussing issues of climate change and what we can do as individuals and collectively to address some of these issues surrounding climate change. This workshop is sponsored by the National Lottery Community Fund as part of the Together for Our Planet program. This workshop is part of our project, South Lanarkshire Digital Climate Change Workshop, digital change project aimed at raising awareness of climate change and also to engage and increase the participation of refugees and asylum seekers in South Lanarkshire. So a big thank you to the community funds for sponsoring this project and making it possible for us to be discussing climate change and what it means to us today. In today's workshop, I'm joined by a very experienced environmental professional who would actually be facilitating this project and be explaining to us what climate change is all about and what are the steps we can do to embrace climate change. But before I bring him, I also have some key important leaders within the communities here in Scotland who are joining us. And in no particular order, I have with me Mr. George Tarr of Radio Kilimanjaro. I have Mr. Jota of Jambo Radio, who is here with me, and he's part of this project, and he'll be making his own contributions. George, do you want to say hello to us? Project, and he'll be making his own contributions. George, do you want to say hello to us?
Yeah, I'll say hello. I don't know if everyone can hear. I don't think I can hear.
I can hear you live and clear.
I can hear you through my headphones. Yeah, I'll say hello. I don't know if everyone can hear. I don't think I can hear.
Okay, I think we're getting feedback from there. But while we're on that, I will bring in Chief Emeka Onyekwere. Chief.
Hello, good morning, viewers, and thank you so much for bringing me in.
Chief Emeka is from Friends for All project, and he's going to be part of the participants on this workshop today. And I also have Shuli from AISO. Shuli, do you want to say hello to us quickly?
Hello, everyone. It's good to be
Good morning. Nice. And I also have with me Bukola.
Morning, everybody. It's great to be here.
Morning. And I have with me as one of the in the panel as well, Johnson.
Hello, everyone. Good to see all of you.
Good morning. And I also have a seasoned actor among us here, Sudi.
Hello, everyone. Good to be part of this as well.
All right, cool. Okay, as I said earlier on, this project is funded by the community funds by National Lottery. And talking about the facilitator of today's program, Mr. Ebi Idudu, who is a very experienced, I'm just trying to see. Before we go on, let me try and let me take everybody out and then I'll bring in Ebi. Talking about Ebi, he's an experienced environmental professional with over 10 years of invaluable progressive experience with Refugee Council, the University of Warwick, East Ayrshire Council, and North Lanarkshire Council. He's a chartered member of the Chartered Institute of Waste Management and is currently a PhD research student in carbon management at the University of the West of Scotland. And he holds an MSc in Waste Management with Environmental Management from the University of West of Scotland and a BSc in Civil and Environmental Engineering from the University of Lagos. So we definitely have a very experienced person to to lead us on this. And I will quickly bring him in. Ebby.
Hello.
Hello,
I
hello,
hope
hello.
everyone can hear me. Good morning to everybody, and I hope Happy New Year's are in order. Still January, so Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year. Okay, so without wasting too much time, we would like to get straight into this workshop, and I believe you have some things to talk us through what waste management, what climate change is all about, and what we can do as individuals to embrace and to address some of the issues that will be discussed.
Yes, thank you very much. I don't know if the slides are up yet. Can you put that up for us? Thank you. So yes, thank you to everyone. Thank you, obviously, for this opportunity. So basically, what I've been tasked to do is basically do a presentation on climate change. Basically, and it's about trying to raise awareness about what climate change is, what the issues associated with climate change are, how climate change does occur, and what we can do really to, contribute towards actions to try and combat climate change. So I believe we've got like a 2-hour window, which has started already. But I'm sure it'll take us anything between an hour to 2 hours. It'll be open for discussions. I guess that's the whole idea as well, just so that we can engage with each other and obviously discuss issues. Olumide, thank you for introducing me. I don't know there's not much else to add to what Olumide says, but it does look as if you've looked at my LinkedIn profile, I suppose, because that just sounded like a LinkedIn update. But no, thank you very, very much. So the aim of what we're looking to do basically is to raise awareness on climate change and its impacts, especially how it affects us as individuals and locally as well. The learning outcome we're looking to achieve by the end of this workshop, I hope that you would have an overview of what climate change is and the actions that are being taken to address the issues of climate change. That's just the program which I've kind of put through a couple of hours. It is just a guide. By default, I'm pretty sure through conversations, we'll miss some of the timing. We'll have to play catch up as we go along, but by all means, at the end of the day, what's important that we're able to discuss the issue of climate change and how it might, affect us as individuals, as a community, and as a nation. So we would have a quick welcome and introduction, which I suppose has been done by Olumide already. We'll talk about what climate change means, what causes climate change, what the impacts are, what actions can be taken to address climate change, and what we might be able to do as individuals. At the end of it, we're going to have a very short quiz. The whole idea of the quiz, which we'll do together anyway, is just to test our understanding of what we set out to achieve, i.e. what is climate change, what are the impacts, and what can we do to try and attend to climate change. So, welcome and quick introductions. Like I said, Olumide has covered that for me in many ways. The Together for Our Planet program, which is really funding that's helping the communities to take action on climate change, and that's communities UK-wide. Tonflix obviously have worked with the Together for Our Planet program, hence the reason why we're here today whilst we are here for this workshop. And hopefully we can, gain what we've set out to achieve at the onset, which is basically to raise our awareness and understanding of climate change. So it's a big thank you to the Together for Our Planet program and to Tonflix. So we, obviously we're talking about awareness, we're talking about climate change, we're talking about education. These are very powerful tools that we have to us. Education is a very crucial part of climate action and trying to promote climate action. Education would help us raise our awareness. Education will help us to understand a lot better what climate change is. It would help us to understand how climate change impacts us. And when we are looking to prefer solutions, we'll be looking at solutions that, are based on informed on information as to how climate change, how vulnerable we are as individuals to climate change. So through education for sustainable education, which is a UNESCO type of program, UNESCO basically has been working to, make education very crucial and make it at the center of climate change action and our response to climate change. You have things like the Sustainable Development Goals as well, which is being rolled across all universities and schools basically across the UK as well. But basically, it's really, in terms of climate change, the international community recognizes, the importance and importance of climate change education, importance of training, obviously, to address climate change. Only half of the world's national education curricula make any reference to climate change, according to UNESCO, and that's why it's more important that we're able to raise awareness, we're able to tap into resources that we have just now, i.e. this funding, to be able to put this workshop together and have that platform and opportunity to be able to discuss and raise our awareness on climate change. So I suppose.
Sorry, Abby, before we go forward, I just have one quick question. So climate change, with the way we see climate change, especially the way it's being used most times, does climate change, is it a negative thing? Is it necessarily negative? And when we're talking about climate change, is it always about negative? Or what exactly is this?
Well, hopefully, I don't know if that question would have been better towards the end of the presentation. No, it's fine. I just meant because obviously by the time we go through the end of the presentation, some of those questions might already be answered. However, climate change, yes, has the negative side of it, and that's probably what we see most of the time. So things around, obviously, the impact of climate change, how it affects the environment, that's obviously negative. So a lot of it is negative. However, it does present us the opportunity in a positive perspective to be able to, take action in a different light. So we know what the issues are. We know what the problems are based on science, which we obviously rely on. We know what those issues are. And the positive is that we can then, with the understanding of those issues, put in place solutions, actions that can, help to address climate change as we go forward. So those are positive aspects of it, because then it means that, to summarize it, for example, climate change, there are issues with climate change. We'll come to that during the slides. Most of the issues are associated with the burning of fossil fuels. So there's no doubt that we need to move away from the burning of fossil fuels. But as we move away from the burning of fossil fuels and transition into the use of other renewable sources of energy, for example, it then means that there is a skill set there that is required for that transition from a fossil fuel-based industry, for example, into a renewable industry. So you need that skill set, which is a positive side of things as well, in terms of being able to acquire desired skills that would help us transition into this new world that we, that the science tells us we have to be in.
Okay, so another quick one. You mentioned fossil fuel, because we're just I want to make sure that everybody's, on board of this, and, for the sake of some people that might not be able to ask questions, can you break down what fossil fuels mean, please?
So fossil fuels are basically sources of energy. So the main fossil fuels that we have today are the common ones, things like coal for energy. You have oil, you have gas. So those are the main fossil fuel sources of energy. And it basically means when you do burn such fossil fuels for whatever reasons, i.e. you burn coal to produce electricity, to produce heat, the same with natural gas, the same with oil, some sort of oil, obviously petroleum products, for example, petrol, diesel, that's some sort of oil, but we use that for transportation. We use that as energy to fuel our vehicles, to transport ourselves. So those are fossil fuels, basically. And the issues with fossil fuels is when you do burn fossil fuels, it releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. I suppose there'll be a question around what is greenhouse gases, but again, if we can go through the presentation, we'll probably pick up on some of those things as we go along. So I suppose the next question then really is, what does climate change mean to you? What does it mean to us? I don't know if there's any way we can use the chat function or open it up to people to just say, comment on that, what climate change means to.
So at this stage, we'll just quickly say for 1 minute, everybody, if you can contribute, what does climate change mean to you? If you want to say something, please do. If you want to comment on YouTube, on Facebook, please drop your comments. What do you feel climate change means to you? Thank you. And do we have anybody in the panel that wants to quickly say what climate change means to them? Chief, you are the first person from my left here.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Like the facilitator has been saying, climate change is, I think it's a negative impact to the environment.
Okay.
To me, in the sense that all this carbon, all those carbon we burn, the things that comes out from the machineries they use in the industries, all these things I think have a very bad effect on the environment, which affects the earth where we live on. So,
okay,
to me, climate change is something we need to tackle very, very, very urgent, so that it doesn't destroy the earth.
All right, thank you very much.
Climate change for now.
All right, thank you. And I have with me Shuli. Do you want to say something? What climate change means? I think, sorry, I think you're, okay, cool. We can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you clearly now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. It includes both global warming, its impact on the earth and weather patterns, and it affects people in different parts of the world differently, based on the type of emission, the weather changes, and the type of climate change and disasters they might have. Some could be flood, some could be weather, some could be the air they breathe. More example in Nigeria now is the one we are experiencing in Port Harcourt, in Rivers, the weather change.
Okay.
I don't know what gas is being emissioned into the air that is usually dark, that people breathe in, even in their cars, even the air that they breathe is moldy, and it affects them both in their health and in the environment. So the reason why these things are very important, it also has to do with the things we use. It involves even our daily activities and the things we use even in our household items, which could include the food we eat, being able to recycle, the amount of waste we leave out, even at home, or even the clothes we wear, things that goes back to the landfill. I remember we did a project here about climate change. Most women don't even understand what climate change means, especially the ethnic minorities. Bringing it down to their level is one of the major challenge we have. One is because of language barriers, level of education, and communication. So we did a project that has to do about upcycling and recycling of clothes. Now, the question could be, what does clothes has to do with climate change? Or what does plastic has to do with climate change? The clothes we wear, the amount of clothes that go out there that people no longer use, that we can easily put in the bin or throw them away, and they will occupy the landfill. It go down to affect the climate. So the way we dispose those things affects the climate as well. If we burn them, the air, the fume that comes out from them will go to the air. And if we decide to throw them away, they will occupy some space in the landfill. So being able to upcycle or recycle them is where the education and information comes in. So now telling people that no, you can use your used clothes, upcycle them to make maybe you can use your cotton, used cotton, old cotton to make maybe cushion covers, to make pillow covers, to do other things instead of throwing them away. That's why it is important for people in that level, in the household level, to know the impact of climate change and how they can also help to reduce some of the things that goes out there. Also, the plastic waste. You see people drinking, like back home, you see a lot of pure water, waterproof and nylon all over the places. All those things affect the climate in one way or the other, because those things, they won't even, they are not something that will maybe defrost or something that will they turn to be generated to manure or something that, but when you leave them in the plant field, they will just be there, and they affect the climate. Some of them are being disposed in the river. It affects even the animals in the river, like the fishes, the whales, and all that. So these are where the information and awareness of climate change is important to us that don't have control over certain things. Like the industries, the companies, those ones, we don't have control over those ones because we are not the people that manage those ones. But the little ones we could
Exactly.
do within our own domain, within our household, is very, very important for us to know the awareness so that we can be able to also help to reduce some of those challenges
The
that
issues
we are
of
having.
yes.
Climate change, yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Before we go to another person within this panel, I'll quickly show someone on YouTube said climate change is our environment caused damage to the climate. Okay, would look into that. And
Please, may I quickly say something?
yes, go
Um,
ahead.
I might excuse myself because I
Okay,
have a meeting by
yeah,
12,
you
if that's
yeah, that's
okay.
yeah, that's
We're
fine.
already
You told
aware
me.
of that, yeah.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine. All
Thank
right,
you so much,
all
everyone.
right. Buki, do you have what does climate change mean to you? We'll just quickly do this so we can go on with the
Well, for me, I would say climate change is just about the warming of the earth, the increasing temperature of the earth. And as we go further on into our years, we're seeing more droughts, more flooding, heavy flooding in certain parts of the world. And even like glacier caps are melting in Nigeria. Like glacier ice caps don't have an impact on us directly, but flooding has an impact on us. And I think I was watching a documentary recently, actually, about Nigeria, and there was two boys trying to dig a well. That's their life job. They dig wells, but they have to dig deeper now, about maybe 2 feet deeper every year to get water. So their families struggling to get water. Their families struggling now on their farms because of the droughts to get food. And all of these have a direct impact on the quality of life that people have, and their families struggling more and more. So we need to try our efforts to do our bits, even if it's recycling. The main one that I would say affects us, we all drink Coca-Cola, Fanta, Sprite, all of these bottles that we use, plastic bottles, a lot of them are discarded into the ocean. We're not recycling these. Even something as small as that can have a direct impact on us making our effort to do our bit towards climate change.
okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I think one of our panelists here, well, I can't see a video. She sent a message. Vina, are you here with us? Okay, I can't see a video, but then I can't really hear as well. I think she said upheaval and worldwide societal and environmental change. So, Abby, does that upheaval and worldwide societal and environmental change. That's what she sent as a message. I think that's what maybe that's
Yeah,
what.
so I suppose that's what climate change means to her.
Okay.
I suppose that all of the comments are on point. They're all
Okay, let me just quickly bring in Mr. George.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. George of Jambo Radio. Yeah, Jambo Radio Scotland.
Thank you very much, Olumide. This is great subject. Sorry, I clear my throat a bit there. I've been waiting. I think for me, climate change basically means the activities, well, the consequences of human activities in an increasingly commercial way, where global trade has increased. More people are traveling, to different countries. So all those activities, goods are being shipped or imported, and back and forth and globally. So those activities are creating a consequence of impacting our environment, and also how the pollution that comes from those activities that we're doing, airlines, using cars, with them. For I think the facilitator there mentioned about fossil fuel, which is also contributing to pollution and environmental impact, having an environmental impact. So for me, those are consequences of human activities that are creating, climate change.
Okay.
I think for me, that's my understanding of it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think V is back. I'll just quickly check on her to see before we go to our facilitator. Vienna. Hey, okay, finally we see you guys.
Two of us.
Hiya.
Hiya.
Okay, so what's the question we're discussing now is, what does climate change mean to you? What do you feel is climate change?
Go for it, Cassie.
Hey, okay. I think the other point that made about the investment that's needed, I think climate change is happening already, and we're not. That's not going to go. But what we need to do is, as well as us as individuals needing to do our little bit by not buying things that we don't need and recycling, it's also that the institutions, government especially, big business, commerce, they need to kind of actually start caring properly and actually not producing all of the, for example, plastic wrapping. I mean, this Christmas, for example, plastic wrapping was unbelievable. I mean, we filled up the recycling in 1 hour. All of it was unnecessary, and it's just this massive amount of kind of stuff that we're producing for fairly minor comforts, really. And if we can't even stop doing that, then how are we going to actually solve the problem in a bigger way? So I just think that bigger investment that on the levels of kind of COVID or even more, and then there is a potential for a positive outcome where the future is actually quite good, and we're using electric power. Electricity is generated environmentally, so that we're not producing. So by having goods that we buy, they're not produced by burning coal or oil and stuff like that. It's produced by energy from the sun or wave power, that kind of thing. So there is potential benefits and positivity, but at the moment we're not heading in the right direction.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And okay, I have Sodi. Sodi, what does climate change mean to you?
I think everyone have actually said basically what climate change means. To me, it's really the shift in temperature. From my recent reading, I've come to realize that climate change can happen naturally. However, it does seem like in the last few centuries, more recently, humans have kind of accelerated it. So usually it should happen gradually, like in very, very minute steps. But we have managed to accelerate it so much that it has now become a concern. So that's what climate change means to be. I will talk more about it in due course.
As we go on. Okay. So, Abby, I think we should go on with the workshop and see what you've got for us.
And every single comment that has been made thus far has been spot on. Everything that's been mentioned is what climate change is all about, to be honest. I was taking notes as we were going about, and things like air pollution, emissions, global warming, investments, packaging, landfill of items that are not biodegradable, negative impact on the environment. It affects people differently, food consumption. A rake of things that were mentioned that all fit into basically what climate change is and what it potentially means to us as individuals as well. I think it was Shuli that mentioned that it impacts us in different ways, and that's absolutely correct. Climate change impacts us in different ways. But it's important that we understand, obviously, the impact of climate change to us as individuals, how it affects us within our community, so that whatever solutions we're trying to put forward to tackle climate change can be, in many ways, community-led in that sense, so that, we're not just putting a solution to something that, is not going to work. Whereas if we generate the solutions based on, the information we have about how vulnerable we are as individuals within our communities, then we can, have impact solutions, if I can, call it that phrase. But then, so the fact that it impacts us in different ways. So unfortunately, those who pay the biggest price for climate change, mostly in poorer nations, they actually are contributing the least to climate change in the bigger scheme of things. And that brings about some sort of social injustice or the terminology that came about on climate justice, which is defined as ensuring that that collectively and individually we have the ability to prepare for, to respond to, and to recover from the impact of climate change. Obviously, to do that, we need policies around mitigation, we need policies around adaptation, in considering the existing vulnerabilities, the resources, and our capabilities as well. So what is climate change? By way of definition, there are a rake of definitions out there. But one thing I would say is climate change is definitely one of the most significant topics of our generation. Right now, I suspect, in my own opinion, it would even become more of an issue in years to come, because when we're talking about sustainability, we're actually talking about, over an extended period of time. We're talking about future generations as well. So all of the things that we're doing now, all of the actions or inactions that we take now will be felt in later generations. And that's why it's more so important that, we all have a better understanding, I suppose, some sort of acceptance on climate change, that it's real and it's happening, and collectively see what we can do to think about the future generation. Really, a lot of the impacts that we're seeing now really is to do with the industrialization period, but I suppose we were none the wiser at the time, but everything was looking great. But all of the impacts of that industrialization era we're starting to see now by way of climate change. But before we can define climate change, I think it's important that we differentiate between what the weather is and what the climate is. So when we talk about the weather, we're talking about short periods of time, like a day, like an hour. So for example, in a particular day, in the morning it might be rainy, in the afternoon the sunshine might come out, and at night time we might have hailstones, typical Scotland, I suppose. But however, that is a weather condition in that sense. But when we're talking about the climate, we're talking about extended periods of time. We're talking about decades, 30 years to centuries to hundreds of thousands of years. And it's the change of the climate over that period of time. So when we're talking about climate change, we're actually referring to the climate, which is about, changes that are happening over an extended period of time, as opposed to just what does the weather look like today, or what's the weather forecast for tomorrow. So we're looking at extended periods of time. So climate change, according to NASA, is a long-term change in the average weather patterns that have come to the Earth's local, regional, and global climates. These changes have a broad range of observed effects and are synonymous with the term climate change. I like the second definition here, which is from the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change. It's a change of climate which is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity. I believe it was Sudi that hit the nail on the head with that one in terms of what obviously are human are the activities that, well, a few people I think mentioned it, that the activities that we do. So our activities, our want, our need, to have a better, comfortable standard of living really feeds into all of this. But, consequentially, directly or indirectly, we are contributing basically to climate change. So I'm really sorry about that. I'll define that again. A change of climate, which is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alters the composition of the global atmosphere. Yeah, sorry. In addition to natural climate variability, sorry, something popped up on my screen there. Variability observed over comparable time periods. But again, making reference to extended period of time, comparable time periods as well. So we'll move on to the causes of climate change. I think, again, I'm sorry if I'm getting names mixed up here, but I think Sodi mentioned this one. This is the one I believe Sodi actually mentioned in terms of there being a natural sort of climate change and there then being a sort of human-induced climate change. So it's important for us to understand what we call the greenhouse effect. Similar to a greenhouse, when you plant, your fruits or veg in a greenhouse, you zip it up, all the heat is trapped inside, and that warms up the greenhouse. If you open a greenhouse or you walk into a greenhouse, then you would understand what I'm talking about in terms of the heat. Now, what we call the greenhouse effect, greenhouse gases, which is, various forms of gases that are released into the atmosphere and cause, pollution amongst other things. But due to industrial processes or combustion, even for petrol, for example, when you're driving, petrol is combusted and that releases, emissions into the atmosphere. But greenhouse gases do occur naturally in the atmosphere. And there's a reason for that, because it helps with that greenhouse effect we spoke about. Because those greenhouse gases, basically, they create what you call like a blanket over the earth or over the upper atmosphere. But like I says, it's a natural sequence. So basically, the sun hits the earth, and then you have, heat trying to escape in that sense. But these greenhouse gases then trap the heat on earth. And that's what gives us that kind of comfort that we have across Earth in terms of temperatures. You can imagine if the greenhouse gases were not available, it means we would have extreme cold, for example. So it means that the oceans would freeze completely because we don't have that greenhouse effect. But bear in mind, this is a natural occurrence that allows for temperatures on Earth to be habitable. The problem then occurs or arises. So this is a little schematic that shows you basically what that greenhouse gas effect looks like. So the solar radiation passes through the atmosphere, hits the Earth, it radiates, but greenhouse gases basically trap it, send it back on Earth, and it warms up the Earth, and it gives you a nice, comfortable average temperature. And that's a natural sequence. However, the problem does occur when we start to add more and more greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, because then it's trapping more and more heat, and then that is what brings us to the term global warming. Before we go to that, though, I need to mention greenhouse gases in terms of examples of greenhouse gases. So there are a few greenhouse gases, but there's a basket of 6, which was identified by, I think it was the Kyoto Protocol in Japan, of 1997. But anyway, there are examples of greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide, CO2, we have methane gas, we have nitrous oxide, we have hydrofluorocarbons, we have perfluorocarbons, and sulfur hexafluoride. Now, these are the 6 main greenhouse gases. methane gas is probably the most potent in terms of quantity. So if you have the same quantity of CO2 and the same quantity of methane will be more potent in terms of its global warming potential. Carbon dioxide, on the other hand, is the most dominant of greenhouse gases, in that it's the, if I can say it, it's the most common greenhouse gas. It's the one that is released through a number of processes. So it becomes the most dominant of greenhouse gases and gives us most of the problem. So that's why when you speak about climate change, or when people talk about climate change, they often refer to carbon dioxide. When you calculating your carbon footprint, you often calculate it in carbon dioxide equivalents. Now, there's another school of thought that would argue, what a carbon footprint should be, or what a climate footprint should be. But I suppose that's for a separate conversation. However, these are greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases do trap heat to the earth. They warm up the earth nightly, but the problem arises from human-induced climate change. And there's a rapid increase in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere beyond those natural levels, beyond what the natural system, requires. And this is largely as a result, again, of human activities. We're burning fossil fuels like coal to heat our homes. In Scotland, obviously, given context to Scotland, I believe the last coal fire plant was decommissioned a few years ago. Scotland is, at least on paper, pretty much decarbonized for electricity. So most of Scotland's electricity, according to the Scottish government, does come from renewable energy. I think that's almost up to 90%, or between the range of 80 and 90% of Scotland's electricity, does come from renewable energy. But yeah, so we use other things like petrol, diesel for transportation. Again, that's why we're starting to hear things about, electrification of vehicles, people going electric. I must say, though, that we need to be conscious of where that electricity is coming from. Is it definitely from renewable sources of electricity? But obviously, it's very positive, the fact that, we can move on to electric vehicles. Oil, natural gas for heating our homes. So buildings, transportation, these are areas that do, that are significant sources of emissions of greenhouse gases, especially when talking about transportation for traveling, for example. And again, I think someone alluded to that as well in terms of jet fuel. So jet fuel, in terms of the mileage you're covering using that amount of jet fuel, that's why transportation is very key as well in terms of areas that we can target. Because for you to put in place actions, you need to understand what the issues are. So we know that transportation is an issue. We know that heating is an issue. So we need to decarbonize the heating industry, or decarbonize our heat grid. And we need to make sure that, obviously, in terms of transportation, we indulge in active travel. We have electrification of vehicles. Unfortunately, there's no one size fits all. But all of these little steps that we do, obviously, would all contribute towards, action in addressing climate change. The other things like deforestation, for example, which is the cutting down of trees. Trees act as a carbon sink. They absorb carbon dioxide a lot. So when we start the process of deforestation, it then means we're taking away, the capacity of the trees to capture some of those CO2 emissions, as opposed to allowing them go into the atmosphere and then contribute to global warming. The flip side of that as well is when you cut down the trees, because they are absorbent of carbon dioxide. If you do burn them, then it means you're releasing those CO2 back into the atmosphere again. Agriculture and land use. Obviously, agricultural practices have changed in recent times. And if you remember, I mentioned something about it's about standardizing our living, trying to make things more comfortable. But unfortunately, what we have done in the past has come with consequences, which we need to understand and make sure that, moving forward, we're making informed decisions about processes, about things that we do. So human influence has warmed the climate at alarming rates for the past 2,000 years. Again, we're talking about climate change. That's the extended period of time we're talking about. We're not talking about yesterday's weather. We're talking about an extended period of time. If you spoke to your grandparents, for example, and asked them, oh, how was the weather, in those years, that, wherever they tell you that you can relate that to climate change, because that's an extended period of time of 30 years and more, that you can use to judge, has the climate actually changed? But there's widespread and rapid changes in temperatures in the atmosphere, in the ocean, on land. We're currently heading for 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer world. You might think 1.5 degrees is not a great deal, but it is a lot. And that's why, obviously, the world was brought to Glasgow in regards to climate change more recently. And there was something called the Glasgow Climate Pact, which is basically world leaders from about 200 countries agreeing to keep the dream of keeping 1.5 degrees alive. Hopefully we can come to that in a wee bit more detail in a subsequent slide. But we're currently about 1.2 degrees Celsius warmer than we were in the 19th century. And there's 50% more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere today. So that shows you the extent of what's happening. And this is all scientific evidence. Obviously, we've gone through a process where more of us have been skeptical about climate change, but more and more the science is proving that it is a reality.
Sorry, before you move on, I just want to bring your attention to this comment. Someone says sometimes we can't avoid these fossil fuels. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, personally, obviously I'm all for, switching away from fossil fuels, but it's not going to happen overnight. And that comment might be correct or should be correct in certain circumstances. So even if, for example, we have all the renewable technology in the world today, right now, there's going to be that transition period, obviously, for us to then move away from fossil fuels. It's not just going to stop, all of a sudden. Unfortunately, our national infrastructures, so things like the national grid, for example, are already designed based on, fossil fuels being fed into the national grid. Don't get me wrong, it's been adapted. You get renewable energy feeding into that as well. But these are the issues that, fossil fuels will still be with us in many ways, but we are hoping that it wouldn't be, or I'm hoping that it wouldn't be for an extended period of time, because we know it's an issue. What we need to do is try and get solutions to slowly but surely move away from the use of fossil fuels. And it is possible. Obviously, it would raise the question around what happens to the fossil fuel industry, but they can they transition into this new renewable, clean, low carbon technology industry in that sense? Can they have transferable skills that can then go into that? But yeah, in terms of the comments, sometimes I suppose I would agree. Sometimes right now it might be unavoidable. Sometimes it's to do with choice, and sometimes it's to do with the national infrastructure. But the bottom line is it's been identified. I don't think there's much doubt out there anymore that the burning of fossil fuels does cause us a problem, and it is a debate. How do we move away from using fossil fuels?
Okay, I think Mr. George of Jambo Radio has a question for you, Ebi. Yeah, George.
Yes. Hi, EB. EB. Good workshop. I'm afraid it's just that time never allows us to participate fully in this thing. But before I go, I just wanted to find out, in your knowledge and your studies of this thing of climate change and the impact, the consequences, all of that you've mentioned in there. Now, emerging countries, emerging economies, particularly in Africa, want to industrialize. So want to industrialize. The developed Western world has industrialized, created a lot of the impact, the consequences that we're dealing with on climate change now. Do you think that emerging economies and developing countries should not industrialize because they have not created the consequences or the impact of climate change at the moment? But these are emerging economies. They have massive unemployment. They need to create industry, which will be pushed by fossil fuel, coal, all of that, which the Western countries or developed economies have benefited from using those materials, so to put it. What do you make of that? That's my question.
Yeah, I think I mentioned in an earlier slide climate justice. So I think that resonates well, with the comment that you have made there quite clearly. Unfortunately, those who contribute the least to climate change seem to pay the biggest price in poorer nations. I'm not quite sure I have the answer to your question, but I'll probably have more questions that can help that debate and probably help you get answers.
Okay.
But in terms of, industrialization, yes, the Western world in that sense has gone through that industrialization revolution, and that's where we are today. The impacts, many of which we are feeling now, many of which has been felt even in poorer nations. I suppose at this stage that we know it's where the problem has come from. Industrialization, I don't think is the problem, because we can get industrialized but use renewable sources of energy, for example. So I would expect that if there's going to be a sudden boom of industry in these developing countries, it would be based on renewable or low carbon sources of energy, as opposed to going down the fossil fuel route, which obviously has already been done in developed countries, and we can see the consequences. As part of the climate change, in terms of like climate justice and things like that, even at the COP conference, one of the big debating points was about the monies that the developed world should be making available to developing countries. I think there was a pledge for some billions of money to have been acquired or gathered at this stage. And I think that had started from the Paris conference. But obviously that didn't materialize, and it was important that at the COP26, that the world leaders then made sure that, they had that commitment from world leaders. So I think the likes of Scotland, the like of UK, they've increased their pledge. So there is that sort of climate justice funding in that sense, which should then go towards these developing countries, in trying to, help them build this sort of industrial, society based on low carbon technologies and based on renewable technologies as opposed to fossil fuels. I don't know if I've dribbled my way out of your question. I hope I have.
No, you're actually
answers from that as well.
You're actually bang on. I like the articulation on the questions, and these are the conversations that need to be had at many times. I was just mentioning to Olumide that I'm really grateful to be part of this workshop and having a knowledgeable person like yourself. By the way, can I just extend my invitation for you to come on Jambo Radio so that I can have an exclusive interview to discuss climate change? Yes. Thank you, Olumide. I'll have to go, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
No problems. Thank you very much for joining us. And hopefully we can stream this on your platform on Jambo Radio.
Yeah, you send the recording over. We can put that through.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ebi, let's go on.
Yeah, so we'll move on to the impacts, which obviously a lot of when we ask the question around what does climate change mean to you, I guess a lot of the comments that came back were around the impacts of climate change, because these are the things that you see. I was having a conversation with Olumide the other day, and I said to him about the topic of climate change. I was like, all you need to do if you are in doubt is just switch on the television, listen to the news, and it's reports of, natural disaster after natural disaster. And it's not just the reports of them, but it's the increasing reports of them, and also the intensity of those, of those events, those natural events that are happening that, suddenly makes you wonder, or should make you, realize that this is, that there is evidence in the science, and the things that we've been hearing over the years, does look like it is indeed true. Put it this way, I suppose there's nothing to lose in that sense, if we do everything we can to try and tackle climate change. And if it happens that that's not the case, then I suppose we've not lost anything. If anything, we've gained a lot. We've gained a lot by, understanding where our problems are and being able to go through that process of, from that understanding, putting out solutions there that are specific to, how climate change, for example, impacts us as individuals. But the impact of climate change, sea level rise, for example, and that has its own kind of consequences, that could lead to farming difficulties, which result from changing rainfall patterns. The inconsistency in rainfall patterns then means that, there are difficulties with farming. It then brings about issues around food security, even with, sea level rise, the fish stock, for example, we start to lose them because all these rapid changes, they are not used to them. They start to get displaced. Pardon me. They start to get displaced. So everything does seem to be linked and interconnected in that sense. And I hope at the end of this we can all realize that our habits, our consumption habits, which I think Shuli had mentioned as well, all of these things kind of link into to climate change. They really do. So we could have severe flooding. We could have fields eroding. And also displaced citizens. I mean, I remember very vividly, very clearly, Haiti, when they had the hurricane there. But it's like I say, you just turn on the news. But the reality is the consequences of severe flooding and storms and things like that is people do lose they lose their livelihood, they lose their homes, they lose their loved ones. So it is real. It is real. Here's an example in Florida, obviously, of rising sea level due to climate change. We have basically global warming, which is so temperature rise, global temperature rise, rise in the ocean, rise in sea surface temperatures, rise in air temperature, on land, overland temperatures. There's increased water vapor, which would lead to other things as well. But you can see from that chart there, again, talking about climate change, we're talking about extended periods of time. So this is a chart that shows you the average temperature between 1850 up until 2020. And you can see clearly there the bit in blue, which is reasonably lower temperatures. But as we go along, you can see the spike, from the Industrial Revolution period. So from about, 1950s, sorry, I should have gone back here. From about 1950 onwards, you can start to see where the reds come on. That's the human impact on it, really, in terms of the amount of greenhouse gases we're putting into the atmosphere, which is then obviously causing the Earth to warm, which then brings about the term global warming. So again, I had mentioned increased frequency and intensity of natural disasters like hurricanes, typhoons, even wildfires. How many times do you turn on the news today and then you see wildfires in America, in Australia? I think even recently in somewhere down south in England. I can't remember the location exactly. But we see these things every day on the news. Droughts could worsen. I think it was Buki that mentioned, obviously, about people digging wells, and every year they have to go 2 feet deeper. And it's because of the drought, because there's, basically we're running out of water. There's decreased snow cover, so not as much snow, melting ice sheets, sea ice and glacier. I think Buki made reference to that as well, if I remember correctly. But yeah, you can see in that picture as well, the ice sheets just melting away. So that brings into question, obviously, we have like polar bears that live there. What happens to them? Do they then get displaced? How do they survive? How do they adapt to climate change as it is, and how it affects them? You could have things with increase in diseases. So droughts are happening. There's only limited opportunity to find water. Everyone is trying to get that water, humans, animals. There's waterborne diseases that are likely to occur as a result of that as well. Undernutrition can come from, obviously, farming, no food. So kids especially would be more prone to that in terms of malnutrition or undernutrition. Other impacts. So I decided to obviously just put some local impact so that we know the fact that the impacts of climate change, they're very, very much felt locally.
Sorry, Abby, just to
Yes.
stop you one quick minute.
Yeah, carry on, man.
I know we've been talking about some of the impacts as drought and probably excessive heat. and people have been saying, commenting on Facebook and YouTube about how the weather is becoming harsh. So my question is, if we start experiencing additional cold, like there is decrease in temperature, is that also climate change? And if that happens over a particular time?
Right. I don't know if you can rephrase that question for us, Olumide. Sorry.
Okay, so what I'm saying is one of the impacts we've seen is increase in temperature. Like there's heat, there's more heat, and there's drought. So does it mean that if we have excessive cold, can that also be attributes of climate change?
Yes, possibly. You could have, again, depending on the area. So you could have extreme winters in certain areas, and you could have extreme summers as well. But yes, that's certainly one of it. But we just need to be careful about climate change and global warming. There's a difference.
Okay.
So when we're talking about global warming, that's just the average temperature is increasing over time. Climate change itself, the impact of climate change could be obviously extreme cold, it could be extreme heat as well. I'm hoping that kind of
Yeah.
Right, so I was talking about the impact of climate change and how they're very much felt locally. In South Lanarkshire, average temperatures have increased, and we've had warmer summers and we've had warmer winters. We've had increased cloud cover, so that's by water vapor, and subsequently rainfall as well. There's less snow coverage during the winter, more extreme weathers like storms, flash floods, and heat waves. So here are a couple of examples. I don't know if you can see the pictures loading up just now.
Yeah, we can see it's already loaded.
So you can see storm damage to residential housing in Burnside in South Lanarkshire Council. You can see flooding on the M74. And you can just imagine the impact of what that. I don't know if you can see in that picture to the left of the screen that has the flooding. You can actually see two vehicles there.
Yep.
And again, you can see the traffic building up, but these are really the impact of climate change as it affects us, locally. So actions to address climate change then. I guess actions to address climate change are basically divided into two. So we have what we call mitigation solutions. And when you mitigate, basically you're trying to prevent something from happening. So mitigation is about stopping climate change from getting worse because it's already happening already. So we need to try and put in mitigation solutions to prevent it from happening. That could be things like, for example, as a nation, so Scotland the UK has targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to have net zero emissions by 2050 in the UK. I believe in Scotland is 2045. So those are kind of mitigation. So how do we mitigate? How can we stop climate change? We consume less in that sense. We use less energy. We can put legislation in place to help us achieve those things. We need to use renewable sources of energy as opposed to using fossil fuel sources of energy. So those are kind of mitigation. Then when we talk about adaptation, the impacts of climate change are already here. We already have severe flooding, like we can see, like we saw in the previous slide. So now that we have that flooding, how can we deal with it? How can we adapt, to that impact? In terms of flooding, one of the things you do is put up flood defenses. So you have a flood defense, which would then obviously, restrict the water from progressing, to areas that you want to prevent it from going into, for example, on the motorway in that sense. So once you can trace the channel of it, you can then put up flood defenses that would take the water, divert the water back to the water course. So international action, we've spoken about So when I put international action there, they can either be mitigation or adaptation solutions. But I just try to put in the context that internationally actions are being taken. So for example, when we had COP26 in Glasgow, I mentioned the Glasgow Climate Pact. Now the Glasgow Climate Pact is basically keeping the dream of trying to maintain the Earth's temperature at 1.5 degrees. A previous slide I'd mentioned we're currently about 1.2, we're heading to 1.5. The truth of the matter is, even if things like the legislation to stop greenhouse gas emissions, even if we stopped emitting greenhouse gases today, the greenhouse gases that have already been emitted, which are already in excess of what the natural, process requires, the impact of those can take up to 100 years to manifest. And that's where we talk about the global warming potential of certain greenhouse gases. So it can take up to 100 years. So that's the painful truth. And I suppose it also puts it in context, the need for drastic action to happen as soon as possible. Because whatever gases we've already released into the atmosphere is going to continue to warm the Earth for an extended period of time. So it does drive the message home that we need to act really quickly and do what we need to do to stop emitting greenhouse gases as soon as possible. So COP26, the Climate Pact, is basically trying to keep that dream alive of, as a society in general, as a world, we're trying to maintain that 1.5 degrees. We don't want it to go beyond 1.5 degrees. There's already talk about it going up to 2 degrees. The impact of which, whatever we are facing now will probably be trebled or quadrupled in that sense. That's just my kind of informed, don't quote me on that one, but that's my informed observation in that sense or comment. National action, I've already made mention about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and targets have been set. So we do have the Climate Change Scotland Act 2009 as amended in 2019, I believe. And that basically drives everything in terms of the legal side of things on what we're doing with climate change. So as part of that, the amended act, has put in place measures to ensure that Scottish ministers do everything they can to achieve net zero emissions by 2045. Might I just add as well, just in terms of the context of the UK, Scotland always appears to be ahead of the game in terms of its use of renewable energy, in terms of its ambitious targets to try and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that's an example of that is obviously in the net zero emissions target. So UK has a net zero emissions target for 2050 and Scotland has it, 5 years earlier on. It is ambitious, but it does demonstrate that, Scotland is clearly trying to take things as serious as possible and do everything they can to, to try and minimize the impacts of climate change in Scotland and beyond. Yes, investment was also mentioned when we spoke about what does climate change mean to you. But yes, so we require a lot of investment. Investment is one of the issues and one of the things that we had discussed previously as well around climate justice and around, developed countries, putting money in a pot to a certain amount of money to make sure that developing countries, can have renewable energy technologies, for example. So investment is very key. Without investment, there's not a lot that can be done, to be honest. We need to invest in renewable technologies. So for example, the national grid infrastructure is already set up as it is for fossil fuels. Can that be adapted? Does that have to be scrapped? Do we need to get a brand new national grid that would run solely on renewable energy? Whilst I'm on that topic, renewable energy in itself can be intermittent because someone had mentioned, Olumide had brought to my attention about fossil fuels not being unavoidable. Unfortunately, renewable energy can be intermittent. So when you talk about wind energy, for example, it won't always be windy. So you need some sort of backup plan, which might be solar, but it won't always be sunny either. And that lends its hand to look for something reliable. Unfortunately, fossil fuels, because of how much time we're spent using fossil fuels, developing things, the market for fossil fuels at the moment, in comparison to renewable energy. You know, it's fossil fuels are a lot cheaper at the moment, but the renewable energy industry has to get to that stage where we're using all this renewable technology. The market becomes cheaper, easier to navigate. There's a lot of investment out there. There's a lot of funding out there. One of the problems, for example, in terms of national action, there are many people out there that are unhappy at the fact that some of the funding that is available is by way of loan as opposed to grants. Because when it's a loan, then as an organization, you have to pay that back. So that can present its own issues as well. Other actions, you know, reduce your carbon footprint as an individual, as a nation, as an organization, as, you know, as a globe. Basically, we need to reduce our carbon footprint. And to do that, we need to reduce consumption. I think that's the most important. It's about our habits and changing our habits. We have to use energy efficiency measures. We have to use things like carbon capture and storage, which is a technology where they're trying to basically, you know, it's a technology that would enable us to be able to capture and store carbon and prevent it from obviously going into the atmosphere and trapping more heat, causing more global warming, which then has, you know, its own impacts for climate change. We need to use renewable and low carbon energy sources. And climate change education is very, very key. Whilst it might not be something, I suppose it is still tangible in other ways, but whilst it might not be something that you would think, oh yes, that would help with climate change, it is absolutely important because education is key, education is powerful, and that's why we're trying to raise awareness on these issues. You just look back so many years ago and where we are today, like I said, more and more people would refute the fact that climate change is real. But as the days and the years go by, you know, with the scientific evidence coming around as well, we're all, you know, now slowly but surely in more ways than one accepting, you know, the phenomenon of climate change to be real. So raising awareness is very key. We need to collaborate with each other. We need to engage each other. We need to learn from each other. We need to learn the new skills that will be required. You know, basically we need to educate ourselves, educate each other, encouraging each other. Community engagement is a way of education, because the truth is we need to understand how climate change impacts us locally, so that when we're putting in solutions, there are solutions that would work, not just a blanket solution that we've adapted from somewhere and it's not going to be pertinent to us because it doesn't address the vulnerabilities that we face individually or as a community. Climate change related careers, again, still on the theme of education and raising awareness. I think awareness itself is the knowledge and perception of a situation or a fact. So it's about raising awareness as well. More actions, local actions taken by South Lanarkshire Council, for example. Some of the themes or things that we have mentioned: electric vehicle fleet installation of charging points, waste recycling rather than landfill. I believe it was Shuli that mentioned that as well, like, you know, things go in the ground and they're just there. The terminology is biodegradable. Plastics are not biodegradable, so when they go into the land, they could be there for hundreds of years. However, obviously, there's other sustainability environmental issues like waste and recycling, landfill. So there is legislation banning biodegradable waste from going to landfill. So all of those kind of feed into ultimately what climate change is. Allotments and food growing, so encouraging people to grow food. When you look at the carbon footprint of a tomato, sometimes you go to a shop, you buy a tomato and it's coming from Peru, you know. These are just little things that, you know, in isolation might not necessarily have a major impact, but collectively, in addition to other actions and to other things, in addition to actions by every individual put collectively, you know, it would go a long way in helping with climate change. Park and ride, car-free zones. Again, the whole idea of that is to reduce travel or to reduce your driving, because we're burning petrol, we're burning diesel, and we're contributing to greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which are causing climate change. So that's why they've put in place park and ride So you can park somewhere, jump on the train for a longer distance. You can park somewhere in Glasgow, get on the train to Edinburgh as opposed to driving to Edinburgh. And as part of that as well, there's what they call active travel. So again, trying to cycle, trying to walk where possible. Renewable energy installations, energy efficiency in school buildings. So in South Lanarkshire Council, that's an example of our solar panels at Newton Farm Primary School in South Lanarkshire Council. Again, just some local actions that, the local authorities taking to try and address the issues of climate change. Over to you, Lumi. What can you do?
What can we do? Well, I think over the time, I feel with my understanding of what climate change is, I feel one of the big things we can do as individuals that we can do right now, because, with your explanation, you said climate change is something that needs immediate attention. And I feel one of the things we can do right now is to try and reduce how much we contribute, how much of these fossil fuels, how much of these carbon footprints, of this, that we contribute, how much we consume. If we actually consume it, then that's fine for good reasons. But I think most of the things we acquire, most of the things we accumulate actually goes into the landfills, just as Shuli said earlier on. And so one great action I feel we should do right now, and we can all do immediately, is to reduce what we acquire, reduce what we get, reduce what we end up throwing away.
Smashing. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Can I add? Yes. Can I make an observation? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Sodi.
Okay, so thank you very much. I was just thinking about how much the government and we as people, how much we actually incentivize the things we do to reduce climate change. So, for example, I've come to realize that it's cheaper to use fossil fuel compared to using electrical or electric vehicles or things like that. So the thing is, whenever they bring out anything that has to do with renewable energy, the prices are really higher than the prices of the things that are bad for the environment. Things like the electric cars that we have, they are so expensive. So it's actually discouraging to go and get an electric car, when actually that's what we should be encouraging people to do, so that we can reduce these cars that burn fossil fuels. That's one. And also, we don't give out any incentive, because we'll come to the point where we need to give incentive for people to actually start carrying out some of these actions. And these actions will then in turn become a habit, because these people are not used to separating the bottle from the plastic, and separating their waste. So I remember years back when I did my graduate studies in Denmark. I remember going to the shop to buy drinks. This was I'm talking 2010, 2009. I went to the shop to buy drinks, and when I left the bottle, I was told to bring back the bottles that I had with me, and those number of bottles I had would give me an additional. I mean, it was a very, very small gesture, but it went a long way, because it meant that when I went home, instead of throwing those bottles away, I kept them together. And when I returned back to the shop, I took all those bottles and I got an extra free drink. So what I'm saying is, people might want to carry out some of these actions, but number one, it's not in their habit. And in order for it to form into a habit, you might want to give them incentive to actually start. And then secondly, I mean, this is probably for the government and bigger corporations. We need to start making renewable energy friendly products cheaper than what we already have if we really, really want to make a difference. That was just a little observation that I was going to throw in when you asked about what we can do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Sudi. Abby, I think there's also two comments on Facebook from Vanessa. What can we do to change these effects, and how can we implement it in our everyday lives? I think, yeah, Abby. So
Yeah, so I'll come back to Sudi. Thanks for your input there. I totally agree with everything you've mentioned. So this slide that we're going to look at, it's not exhaustive in any way, shape, or form, but it's just some ideas as to what we possibly can do. And I hope that would answer the subsequent questions or comments that you have mentioned, Olumide. But just going back to some of Sudi's points there, I think it mentioned about the basically like I'd said with the renewable energy market being more expensive in that sense, or renewable energy products being more expensive. So he mentioned electric vehicles, for example, and then alluded to incentives. Obviously, it's only natural that when you have a new market, i.e., in this case, renewable energy market, it's at the moment it's unable to compete with the fossil fuel market, which is already fully established. So that's a very difficult thing for it to be able to do, to compete in that sense. But Sodi's absolutely right. That's where the government should then come in and try and incentivize these things, because it's the only way to encourage people to then go down the route of, for example, as Sodi alluded to, getting an electric vehicle. Because when you look at the cost of an electric vehicle now compared to electric car, so if you can get an electric car for argument's sake, £10,000, mechanical car in that sense, if I can use that, run on petrol or diesel, the equivalent of that kind of electric could easily be £25,000, which would be about double, if not more. So that's a significant issue in terms of a barrier, because we need to consider what the barriers from moving away from fossil fuels. That's one of the barriers. The competitive market, the market for renewable energy, the lack of incentives by the government in many ways to incentivize these, sort of initiatives around electric vehicles, for example, because the more you incentivize people, the more people would buy into the idea and would obviously engage with that process. All we need to do, there's a lot of politics. It's probably something I haven't mentioned today at all. And probably the first time I've mentioned it. But obviously there'll be a lot of politics. We have issues around the turnover of government. So one government might be in power today and they might be a greenish party in that sense, where they take sustainability and environmental issues very seriously. There's a 4-year turnover or 8-year turnover, and a new government comes in, and that priority then becomes the least of their priorities then. So those are political issues that do arise as well, which unfortunately are unavoidable. But when we put in the context of COVID-19, since COVID has happened, look at the drastic measures that governments have taken all around the world, in the UK, in Scotland. Drastic measures, everything stopped, everything. Those are the kind of measures, those are the kind of drastic measures that need to be taken by governments right now in relation to climate change. Everything stopped. I was surprised. You look at universities, you look at higher education institutions, without time for preparation, they were able to immediately switch, their delivery provisions online, or amalgamate it in some ways, or do some sort of hybrid, which they're still carrying on doing now. So most lectures now in universities would be online. Some are unavoidable, might have to be class-based, but there's that hybrid, some over the year, there's some class and there's mostly online. But we have these opportunities before, but COVID forced our hands to doing that, overnight, just like that. We adapted straight away. Those are the kind of drastic actions that need to be taken by government to ensure that, this issue of climate change is really addressed, because unfortunately, like I said previously, even if we stop emitting greenhouse gases today, it doesn't mean that the impacts of climate change are going to stop today, because we've already emitted greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. They have global warming potential, some of them of 100 years. So we might not see that impact just now until later. And that should drive home the message of the need to take actions now, the need to collaborate and understand how climate change impacts local communities, so that when we're putting in solutions, they can be solutions that we address the issues of the communities, as opposed to a one size fit all solution, which would never work. We mentioned, a few people have mentioned about plastic as well, just to chip into that. I was in Germany a few years ago as well, and they've been doing this for years as well. It's like a plastic deposit return scheme, like Sodi mentioned, in Denmark as well. I think a lot of countries in Europe have been doing that for quite a number of years. In Scotland, I know it's coming in Scotland, but for the past 2 years, it's been coming, and we're still dragging our feet in that sense. But I see no reason why not, because even in Germany, and that was my first experience. I stayed with a friend. There was a plastic bottle, and I thought I was doing the right thing by trying to compress the plastic to obviously make more space and put it in a recycling bin. And the guy was shouting, it's like, no, don't do that. Keep it pristine, because we take it to the shop and you get some money back for it. And it reminds me of my younger days as well in Nigeria, where you have people who would come around shouting to buy bottles from you as well. It's a saying in Yoruba, Ekaro Nigo Deo, like good morning, the bottle person is here. And I can remember even newspapers as well. I can remember keeping them back then just to sell them on the side so that my parents didn't know. But the whole essence for me was to make money. But putting all that into context, you soon start to realize, the whole concept of sustainability, reduce, reuse, recycle, circular economy and things like that. So what can we do? We need to change our consumption habits. I think that's the most important thing. We need to go back to the drawing board by ourselves. I mean, you go to the shops today, 2-for-1 deals, which is a very, very great business strategy, by the way, but that's business. Obviously, it's a very good business strategy when you want to make money. The unfortunate consequence of that is I go to the shop, I buy 2 milk for the price of one, or buy one, get one half price. I take it home. I can't even meet the use by date, and I have to throw it away eventually. But at the time, I thought, oh, that's a great deal. But I'm actually, wasting even more. But let me not get into that one in detail anyway. But we need to
just to add the point to the reuse, and the point Sodi made and the point you made about returning bottles and all those incentives. I think Iron Brew, at least as some years, about some 5 years ago, I know I bought Iron Brew, the big bottle, the 1 liter or something, and when it's up, when you have about 5 of that, or certain number, maybe 3 or 5 of it, you return it, you get an extra bottle free. The Iron Brew, it was £1, that big bottle. I don't know if they still do it, but at least just to also put at the point that in Scotland, at least I know of Iron Brew that was doing it, that they did it that time. I don't know if they're still doing that, but yeah, we should encourage more organizations to try and incentivize things like that. All right.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, we need to use more energy efficient products. It was mentioned that, that should be incentivized as well, so that, people can get into, and it's absolutely correct, because that's the only way you can really get people to engage. And one of the ways for myself personally in doing these things, yes, climate change is real. But when you look at it, when you look at the first part of what you can do there, change your consumption habits, even if you look at that from a financial perspective, it actually drives the message home, and then it becomes a win-win situation, because then you're saving money because you're not buying things that you don't need. You're putting a lot of thought and consideration into things before you purchase them. So really, and it's very difficult for habits to change. Habits stick with us. But for us to change that consumption habit, it might even be things as simple as just leaving the hot water tap running and going to do some things. You do that for 5-10 minutes. You do that over a period of a year. 100,000 households do the same thing over a period of a year. Suddenly, it starts to equate, and it starts to amount, and it starts to contribute significantly. So whilst some of these issues or some of these things that we're saying you can do might seem very minimal, when you put things together in that sense, it all adds up, it all builds up, and it can, give us significant results as well. We need to drive less, drive smart, active travel, which is about cycling and walking. Switch off appliances when not in use. Encourage others to conserve energy. We need to collaborate, engage. We need to learn. We need to discuss. We need to, have these conversations. And by no means are these conversations easy, because you suddenly realize, once you're having these conversations, how it impacts people in different ways. And suddenly, the fact that we all know, or majority of people would agree that yes, we need to do something about fossil fuels, that might affect certain people in certain other ways. For argument's sake, I give you an hypothetical scenario where you have a community that cannot but rely on fossil fuels for whatever reasons. How do you deal with that then? Obviously, we do realize that we need to find solutions to that, but we cannot strip those people off their use of those fossil fuels at that time just because it is wrong in terms of its contribution to climate change. But we need to make sure we have the appropriate solutions that can help that specific community, in this hypothetical case, transition from their use of fossil fuels into the use of other things. So critically, it's important as part of the fight in addressing climate change that we educate ourselves. We understand as well how climate change impacts us in different ways. And that understanding will help us in our consumption habits. Actually, it will help us change, our modus operandi, basically, on how we do things. And then we can acquire key skills. We can become environmental volunteers. We can shop local, and we can grow food at home. Olumide, I believe that's me in terms of the slides.
Okay.
We've got 1 or 2, 5 multiple questions to go through together, but it's obviously everything that we have discussed today, and it's just to try and make sure that the learning outcome that we set out to achieve at the beginning, that at least we've achieved that. Thank you.
Okay, so do you want to go ahead with the multiple questions, or because what I would just say is I'll encourage everyone who's watching right now to, if you have any contributions or any comments, please drop them, and also help us share these videos as well, so that more people will get to know about it. And I think lots of people actually have said a few things. I'll just quickly flash them to you, because I think I'm not sure if you were really looking at the screens, Abby. So someone said very brilliant explanation, says brilliant analysis. God bless you, Abby. And then I think one person also made this comment. Sadly, there's no awareness. We need to create one. When one of the panel says most women don't know anything concerning climate change. So I think that's the beauty of this kind of workshop supported by the community funds. It's good to keep creating this awareness and hopefully get people engaged, and from there we'll begin to know what we need to do. Most especially, we need to start reducing what we acquire. If we can consume them, fine, but at least not just acquiring them for acquiring sake. And according to what Sodi said with regards incentivizing this renewable energy and stuffs, I think currently electric cars is a thing of statement. So it's expensive because the companies producing them have seen business opportunities rather than a social opportunity. They've started making them become a thing of class. Do you understand? So something like, at least I think when Tesla came out, it used to be very, very expensive. It's still expensive, but it's as if it's for a certain class of people. Sodi, what do you feel?
You are absolutely right, and that's the point I'm even trying to make. There is no point saying that we're moving to renewable energy products and then making them really, really expensive. But we don't have control over these things.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
multinationals and the government would have to come together and then decide what's best. I know that I think in the UK, they have started this incentive program whereby if you buy an electric car, the government contributes probably 2,000 or helps you with installing the charger or something in that line. Don't quote me, I might be completely wrong. But I think more of that needs to be done, and then try and make these cars. So we are not looking for luxury. I think that at this point, it shouldn't be about these cars being luxurious cars, but rather these cars should be cars that are trying to change the narrative. So moving now from what we have to renewable energy. So they can be smaller, they can be basic. They don't have to have. The other day, I met a colleague of mine. He bought one of the Teslas, and we sat down in his car and we're watching Netflix on this on the screen. Was really big, and this car it looked amazing. So you can imagine why it shouldn't cost that much with all the things they've added to it. But for me, I was thinking about the fact that okay, so we are moving away from all the problems we have with climate change into having renewable energy products, but then they're making them still expensive and people are not able to afford them. So it's actually still defeating the purpose until we get to the point where we begin to see that these cars are not for luxury, but rather to help with the environment. I don't think it's going to change much.
Okay,
Unfortunately.
and then just to show Abby some of the comments as well. You mentioned politics. I think this Jenny says there is no continuity in the system because of different agendas and all that. And yeah, Comfort David says, Mr. Ebio, thank you for this breakdown. The topic was very educative and interesting. Yeah, so it's been a great time. I would say let's go over to the quiz, and thank you so much for everybody for joining and for your comments. And this is not going to be the end of this conversation. This is just the beginning, and we hope to keep organizing more of these workshops and also get to see what you guys have started taking actions in daily lives in different homes. So Abby.
Yeah, so just to obviously wrap up what we started a couple of hours ago, I suppose.
Yeah, time is gone.
Yeah, just multiple choice questions, 5 questions, nothing untoward, just everything we've basically spoken about. So I don't know how you want to do this, Olumide. I can click, you can ask the questions. I don't know how you're going to get your responses, but after a certain, time length or something, I would just say what the answer, I think the answer should be.
I think we can do it with the people live here. Okay, I think somebody also says thank you for the educative topic. Thank you very much for watching with us. So the question is which of the following statements is not true? Climate change is a long-term change in the average weather patterns. Climate change is a change of climate caused directly or indirectly by human activity. Climate change does not affect us. Okay, for me, I'll answer this and then Sudi can answer the next question. I feel the one that is not true is C.
Yeah, that's correct. Absolutely, from the definitions of climate change that we discussed previously, it is long term. I think I did try to.
Okay. Sorry, somebody on YouTube actually answered. So okay. So I'll leave it open. I'll first of all leave the question for like 15-30 seconds for people online to try and answer. So she says C. So which you said is correct, right, Eddie?
Yeah, that's absolutely. So I was just saying from the definitions, obviously, and I've tried to emphasize. I don't know if I've done a good job of that, but one of the things I was trying to drive home is the difference between weather and climate, so that when people talking about climate change, you can know exactly what you're talking about. So climate change is a long-term change in average weather patterns, long-term, and I think that's the key word there. So we're talking of decades, centuries, and beyond. Climate change is a change of climate caused directly or indirectly by human activity. Absolutely correct. We've mentioned all of the things that humans do, which is basically summarized into wanting to have a better standard of living. In many ways, I mean, you just think about the mobile phones today and how mobile phones are updated. It feels to me like every 5 minutes. And if you're that kind of person caught up in that bubble, then you'll be getting a mobile phone every 5 minutes. Anyway, we'll move on to the next question.
Okay, so the next question, let me just make this bigger. What are the causes? So we'll let people online first before Sodi, you might answer if no one answers. What are the causes of climate change? Burning of fossil fuels, using renewable sources of energy, widespread deforestation. So anybody watching online, watching live from home, from the comfort of your homes? Okay, because I went to the private chat, I think at 1:14, which is right now, right?
Okay.
And V says A and C, but I'm not sure which question she's answering right now.
It'll be question 2.
It'll be question 2. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we have some comments. So Becca David says it's A. Tokumbo Lewis is saying it's A and C. Burning of fossil fuels, so that's A. And then Tokumbo Lewis is saying, so I think her A and C is for question 2, right? Yeah.
Yeah, A and C is what the answer I would expect.
Okay, so V Werner of Prospect is saying it's question 2. Yeah, that she was answering earlier with A and C.
Yeah, A and C, and that's correct. Obviously, option B is using renewable sources of energy. When you're using renewable sources of energy, then basically that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to move to. So that should not cause any sort of climate change at all. It might contribute to greenhouse gases, but it will be very, very minimal. So the correct answer, anyway, is A and C: burning of fossil fuels and widespread deforestation. When we burn fossil fuels like oil, coal, and gas, that releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and we know what happens, from there in terms of the greenhouse gases beyond what the natural system requires. That then leads to global warming. Widespread deforestation, we're cutting down trees. Trees do absorb a lot of carbon dioxide. So when we cut them down, we are removing the capacity of trees to absorb some of those carbon dioxide, which means they're going into the atmosphere. And when we do burn the wood as well, then we're releasing the embodied carbon dioxide within the tree as well. But yeah, so the use of renewable sources of energy should not cause climate change in that sense. However, when you think about how the renewable energy source, for example, when you think about a wind turbine, how is that produced? How is that generated? There could be a carbon footprint for that. However, it would be minimal. And the whole idea is it would be able to offset. So the use of the renewable energy source itself will be able to offset the carbon footprint in associated with the installation of that renewable energy. Question 3. Sorry, I'm conscious of time.
Yep. I think we've kind of exhausted our time, but then we are towards the end. So please go on.
Yeah, question 3. Which of the following is an impact of climate change?
So which of the following is an impact of climate change? Severe flooding, wildfires, nice weather. So we'll leave that for like a few seconds to people online. And just briefly, let me throw this in. I think there is going to be a careers advancement program starting from the 1st of next month. And this is run by Prospect Hub. It's an organization that aims to empower and elevate ethnic minority people and disadvantaged people to try and get into the career of their choices. So please do visit prospecthub.org to find out about this, to find out more about this program. It's a career advancement program. It's an accelerator program where you learn how to, tailor your CVs, how to attend job interviews, and they also support you through jobs, whatever job you're doing. They also support you through it to advance your level to the next stage you are. So please do get in touch with prospecthub.org. Yeah, so I think there's a private chat. So it says A and B for the answer to number 3.
Right. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Carry on.
Yeah, to the answer to number 3, and then I think severe flooding and wildfire.
Yes. So severe
And
flooding and wildfires.
We also have Matthew saying B, wildfires.
Yeah. Severe flooding and wildfires are both correct. So I'd have expected A and B as impacts of climate change based on the options that we have there. I decided to put nice weather just in reference to the fact that I try to differentiate what the weather is and what climate is. So when we're talking about climate change, we're definitely not talking about the weather. So the correct answer is A and B. Question 4. Which of these are actions or solutions to tackling climate change? A is the burning of fossil fuels. B is the installation of renewable energy technologies. And C is climate change education.
Okay, just to repeat that, someone says, I can't see the options well. So I'll read it out again. Which of these are actions or solutions to tackling climate change? Burning of fossil fuels, installing renewable energy technologies, climate change education. Which one is an action or solution to tackling climate change? Some people are on fire here, Again, a private message, V says B and C. So installing renewable energies, climate change education. Let's go to YouTube to see. And Matthew says B and C. And Becca says B and C as well. Louis is saying B and C. Sodi, let's take you back to school. What are you saying?
School 2.
School 2.
It's B and C.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. B and C is what I would have expected. So which of these actions? So when we're talking about actions, what we're looking to do basically is to use zero carbon or low carbon energy technologies or renewable technologies, which will fit into that bracket. And climate change education. Obviously, we all need to learn. We all need to educate ourselves. We all need to be aware. And with that awareness, then means that we can prefer informed solutions to climate change. But make no mistake about the awareness side of things, the behavioral change side of things, and the education side of things. Whilst it might not be something that's necessarily tangible or something that you would see in terms of, oh, that's a wind power, that's a solar panel, that's an electric vehicle, or things of that nature. That there is power in information, there is power in education. So that is absolutely critical. And like I said, UNESCO, the UNFCCC, and many organizations that deal with climate change issues have clearly stated that climate change education is critical for climate action. So the last question: which of these should you do to tackle climate change? A, you can do nothing. B, you can reduce, reuse, and recycle. And C, you can switch off appliances when not in use. Which of these should you do to tackle climate change?
Okay, so the question is, which of these should you do to tackle climate change? A, do nothing. B, reduce, reuse, and recycle. C, switch off appliances when not in use. And the answers are flying in. Matthew Oni is on fire, says B and C. Tokumbo Louis is on fire as well, says B and C. B and C. Ebby.
B and C, ABC.
ABC.
B and C, my mom. B and C, that's correct. That's what I've expected. We absolutely cannot do nothing. We all have to do something. And whilst it might not look like, whatever you do or I do would make a contribution in the bigger scheme of things, it will. Because when you look at what you do, what I do, what everyone on this forum does, what everyone who's going to hopefully watch this video at a later time, and everyone who's participated in the live broadcast as well. When you put all of those things together, then suddenly it starts to build up. It starts to add up. It starts to stack up. So absolutely, we cannot afford to do nothing. We all have to do something. Sustainability really is all about the future generations. It's about considering them as well. So whatever actions we take now are very, very critical. Whilst we do understand and appreciate the fact that even if we stopped greenhouse gas emissions today, we will still see some impact. But that gives us that, the impetus that we need to move forward and to do things, a lot drastically, similarly to how things were done when COVID hit us the first time round. Everything stopped. We need such drastic measures. And every little helps, in the sense that every little bit that we do, that you do collectively, it all adds up and it will contribute to dealing with climate change. So I really do hope that, obviously, these are my references, but I really do hope that at the end of this, we've been able to, at least engage in the process of discussing what climate change is, if nothing else, because I think that process of engaging in this workshop really is a sort of awareness raising that we're doing. Personally, I've learned a lot as well myself from our conversations, from our discussions as well. I've learned a lot. So I do hope that, we, at this stage, if we're ask the question out there about climate change, what is climate change, what actions can be taken to climate change, we will be confident enough to be able to engage in that discussion. And that's the whole idea of this, for us to be able to have these conversations, for us to understand how climate change impacts us as individuals, as a community as well, and what we can do to then make changes now, and obviously also for the future. Because make no mistake, in so many years' time, when we're probably not here, there'll be a generation talking about our generation and what we did or what we didn't do. So for me, I'm very grateful for this opportunity. Thank you very much once again to the organizers of the workshop. Thanks to Tonflix, and thanks to the Together for Our Planet program. Can't thank you guys enough, and I hope that this has been useful to everybody involved. And I would rest my case there. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Ebby. I think we can't even thank you enough for giving us this time to engage us, to inform us, and to keep the conversation going. And hopefully we would get more people to come on board to keep this conversation going, and also to get to capture some of the actions that they've started taking in their personal homes, especially within South Lanarkshire. We'll be going out with our team of digital climate change ambassadors to different people and to ask them what steps they've taken on board from this workshop to start embracing climate change, and also to just generally what they've started doing. And before we go, I talked about the training, the training on the course training that is going to happen at the beginning of next month. I just want to quickly bring in Kirsten to talk about this, because this community is a community that I'm very passionate about, and I just want us all to do better than we are currently doing. And I'll let Kirsten talk more about this course. Vienna herself, here she comes.
Sorry. Oops, hang on. What's happened there? Oh,
no problems.
Hang on. Sorry, I just lost the screen.
Big thank you again to the National Lottery Community Funds for supporting this project, for making this conversation come to life. I really appreciate what you guys have done. We really thank you, because without this support, we wouldn't have been able to do this. Yes.
Go on then.
Sorry, I haven't been engaged in a panel. Eating and meetings.
Yeah, but I've been seeing the comments flying in. I've been seeing your answers to the multiple questions. And I think I have one that I just wanted us to clear. Sorry, I know we're running about time, but you mentioned something. The first was climate change. What did you mean by upheaval, worldwide societal and environmental change?
Oh, that's your comment, Cassie.
Was that for?
That was me at the beginning. Yeah.
That was what climate change meant to you.
Yeah, so just basically that if we carry on, well, I think it's going to happen anyway. There is going to be upheaval. I think it's already happening. We've seen the wildfires in Australia and America. We've even had some in Europe, I believe, and
earthquakes, tsunamis.
Well, but we're going to, we're already seeing that some of the low-lying islands are effectively putting in evacuation plans. So I think we're already kind of seeing what's going to happen. It's just going to continue at this rate anyway. We've just got to try to sort of maintain we need to sort of try to reduce it now so that we can basically continue a relatively normal life. But like I say as well, I think we in the West especially need to kind of massively reduce the amount of consuming that we do. It's consumption, I think, is a big problem. And we keep consuming. And meanwhile, there are parts of the world where people don't have water that's clean and stuff like that. And I think if we can just go back to 1970s or even 1960s levels of the standard of living, I don't think anyone says that the 60s was a terrible time in the West. We were actually quite comfortable, and yet we're producing 10 times more, or I don't know what the figures are, but we're just consuming so much more now than we were then. That's basically. Otherwise, we're heading for big. There's going to be mass migration movements that are going to make what's happening now look pretty minor.
Okay, great. Please, let's talk about the accelerator course.
Oh, sure. Thank you for the platform. Just to say, Ebby, thank you for your presentation. That was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
I hope you're going to do more of these. We learned so much in that short time. In terms of the accelerator course, so that's an 8 weeks program where we work with individuals to support them in their job search. So our focus is really on getting people to the jobs that they want to do, rather than jobs that you can get anywhere. And it's very personalized to the 20 people in the program. 20 because we're going to be online, and you get your coaching as well with myself. The team will be involved in there. And we do everything from your application up until your interview preparation. And our main focus is always when you're in that job, how to maximize that and then progress into wherever you want to be. So we're basically, the big dream is that you're aiming to be the CEO of whichever company you're aiming for. The accelerator course is funded by the Scottish Government and Hunters Foundation, and is aimed at ethnic minority individuals based in Scotland.
That's just brilliant. The link to the website now for people to have a look at. So that's it.
Okay. Please drop it in the comments from YouTube, and then we can also share that.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Sorry?
We'll do that.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. And, it's been an amazing time. I just want to say thank you so much to the community funds for making this possible. And we are looking forward to digitally capture how people have started embracing some of the things that have been discussed today, how we've been applying that to our daily lives. It will be great to capture some of those, and that is what we aim for in the next rounds of our workshop. So it's been an amazing time. I say big thank you to everyone, especially to Abby. I say big thank you for giving us the time, and until the next workshop, I am saying bye.